So with our handsome Mr. Z, Zeus, yes. We're gonna warm up a little bit with some find its while I'm chatting about different types of tools that we could potentially try with him. So I know that for a lot of my students, I normally always recommend a body harness. And the reason behind that is that a lot of times when your puppy's learning and you're learning, there tends to be a lot of moments where the puppies might go to pull, or you might out of habit tend to pull back, which we've discussed in class, why kind of yanking and prodding at the puppy is not a great idea. It tends to have them start to ignore, let's say, for example, leash or leash pressure down the road. Remember that, again, leash pops or corrections are something I do stay away from, because a lot of times you're trying to, at the moment, correct a behavior you don't like. But the problem is that a lot of behaviors, especially for your dog, are their only option for communication is sometimes to offer those behaviors that we've deemed bad dog behaviors. So if, let's say, our pup is barking and lunging and pulling ahead, and we tend to want to yank back and jerk on the leash, the problem there is then your puppy may start to associate that those things that are overwhelming or frustrating or way too exciting also are the things that start to make them feel uncomfortable physically as well. So we want to make sure that, obviously, I do normally recommend these body harnesses that are a Y shape. And the reason behind that, as you can see, as Mr. Z is meandering around, I'll sort of have him walk near me, is you can see that his shoulder blades are able to completely move, and there's no restriction from the equipment. Remember that tools that tend to feel uncomfortable or cause harm in the sense of mental or physical discomfort for the dog tend to work because of the fact that they're uncomfortable and they hurt. So even though the dog's original feelings behind the behavior are not being addressed, the way your dog might look on the outside may seem calmer or softer, but it could also be shutting down or learned helplessness. So I know I've kind of discussed some of these topics in class and also in some of the materials I've sent along. But remember that behavior is not right or wrong, especially for your babe, your pups. View it as their only option for communication from the dog's perspective or from their culture. So I know we've discussed, we don't want to correct a growl, because if we get rid of warning signals that are the whisper of how your dog is feeling at the time, the problem there is we might create a zero dog. And a zero dog is, again, one of those dogs that have been scolded for giving warnings, and those have been taken away from them by scolding or punishing them when they make those responses to things they feel overwhelmed or flustered or scared of. And when we get rid of your dog's ability to whisper how they're feeling, they might go right into shouting, which could actually be making contact. So we would skip the growl, they would skip the snap or bite in the air and go straight into, for example, bites. So we do want to be careful that whenever we're dealing with behavior that we're a little unsure of and you're questioning, is to always reach out, because we don't want it to by accident escalate with the way that we deal with a problem from our end. Might actually confuse the dog more, make them more anxious and overwhelmed, and then at times create a bigger reaction, which could turn into reactivity or aggression down the road. So I know, for example, Mr. Z was having some trouble with his toes being handled. We want to, again, definitely take a peek-see over some of those cooperative care resources that I had sent along. There's, again, a wonderful Facebook group that I highly recommend. So Cooperative Care with Deb Jones. She also has a book as well, and I believe it can be an ebook or a hard book as well. But if you're, again, thinking of tools in a way to stop or prevent behavior, a lot of times it doesn't get at the root cause as to why is the dog doing it in the first place. And that's going to be the first step. Equipment is very much so, should be like training wheels. It can help you learn at the time how to work things without getting harmed, but it shouldn't be the thing that is, again, constantly in use. So down the road, as he becomes more mature and your recalls are more refined, you'd go from training wheels in the sense of using a long line or a training leash to eventually build up to off leash time. But if, let's say, we've only done our regular 6-foot leash and then no leash, that's a very big step where you might have more mistakes from his end and from ours, and then cause more confusion and kind of lose maybe potentially what the recall in general was meant to be. So I know you guys had been mentioning in class how, he's kind of getting bigger and at times a little bit harder to wrangle. So if, let's say, for example, he saw something of interest like a squirrel, and you guys weren't ready and he maybe goes to pull, he could topple you over. So a lot of times with some of the students, I always recommend to figure out your mechanics and your sort of dance moves on benign equipment first, so you're not the one using the gear to show the behaviors. So the reason I like body harnesses is that it's going to avoid harming the neck or the trachea and any other vital, again, essential zones to that area, while also helping you learn how to physically help the puppy do skills without being micromanaging with the equipment. So a lot of times if you can't practice skills as if the babes were naked, then the gear might be the only reason your babe is doing well from our perspective. So I like to go ahead and practice again, as if the dog didn't have gear, and then build up the foundation of the skill set that I want, reinforce for the things I want to have happen again, and then continue from there and build in duration or distractions or distances. So I know one of the other pups in the puppy class was also saying how, she's seen head collars being used. So a head collar, for example, is different than a body harness. Head collars, there's a couple different brands out there. I prefer, if we're going to do potentially a head collar, is the Halti, or there's another brand called Walk and Train, I believe, which is very, very similar to the same design as a Halti. I don't really love the gentle leader because of the fact that it is very snug on the muzzle and it's rather uncomfortable. You will see service dogs that are coming out of different programs, so local organizations that are breeding and also creating these service dogs for people. A lot of those dogs are conditioned with wearing a head collar. So head collar practice can actually also be really beneficial for practicing muzzle training, in the same concept that your dog is getting comfortable and associating things around the muzzle with good things happening. So there's many a times where a lot of different tools can be used inappropriately, or can be a situation where if you don't condition the dog to the scenario that you're going to be practicing, and you just slap on the piece of equipment, be it body harness, collar, head collar, and your babe has never associated it with anything, and they maybe have a harder time outside because of distractions or whatever, your babe might have a really rough time, again, just strapping on this brand new piece of equipment and then trying to go into the real world for practice. So with those pups coming out of the service dog industry, they would be, for example, practicing with head collars when they were itty bitty and just wearing the gear here and there throughout some of their everyday practice. Other times they might be wearing it, but then hooked up to their collar, so there's no actual pressure from the leash being hooked up to the headgear. So head collars can be used incorrectly. So head collars, if you've never conditioned your dog, which means that you haven't built up your dog's association to the piece of equipment feeling comfortable, safe, and non-threatening, is really crucial. If your babe instantly just gets something put on, like for example, a head collar or muzzle, let's say you have to go do something that could be a little harder, like going for a walk with a lot of distractions, and you instantly slap on the head collar, your babe might start to associate this difficult environment, those difficult triggers or things that are very exciting, and now the frustration of having this brand new piece of equipment with those things also happening. So I would highly recommend, if we're going to potentially get him comfortable with using a head collar, is that you really want to take your sweet time with it and not just go right to town slapping it on him and then going right for the walk or practicing in your yard. So with head collars, as I mentioned, you don't want to attach a head collar to a long training leash, because that could cause some severe neck injuries. If your babe was running and trotting or running ahead and they're attached to a head collar with a long training leash, just like a collar, the collar could cause neck damage. The head collar could also cause some neck damage if they're attached to a long training leash, and as they're running, it stops them and it twirls them sideways or flips them. So highly recommend, if you're practicing on a longer training leash, so like a 15 or above, you're going to go ahead and use your body harness, so that way you're not potentially harming the neck in the process. So for Mr. Handsome, I have, for example, this one is the Halti brand. It does normally come with a safety attachment as well. So if, let's say, your babe were to, for some reason, slip out of the head collar, there would be a extra little piece of material here at the bottom, which is normally where your leash would clip on. And that piece of material has another little clip, and it clips to your dog's collar or to their harness. So if this were to slip off the dog, you would still be attached from the leash to this area onto the second piece of equipment. So with this one, I know he's doing a very nice job settling right here while we were working a couple little find its. So, and I can dive more into head collar practice, but no worries. Again, there's no pressure to do it. Remember, I prefer always start with body harnesses and build up your abilities and the dog's abilities in a calm and structured environment where you're more likely to be successful teaching the skills that might be hard for both you and him. So you'll see the head collar looks very much almost like a horse's halter. The thing is too, is this area can be nice and open, where with other brands, the noseband has to be really snug to stay in place. This one, you'll see it has little side straps that I like to hold the noseband in place while allowing it to be nice and wide open. When I first start practicing any like muzzle training or associations with something that's going to be going on their face, I like to, for example, in the beginning, have the item just be out and just do simple, easy skills while it's in the environment with you. If the dog shows interest, like maybe he'd want to go check it out and sniff it, I might go yes, and then feed him for that. So remember that getting him conditioned to the piece of equipment doesn't mean we just slap it on and then try to pair it with good things. That's too big of a step for a lot of them. So again, I would offer, have him smell it, nice, and then go ahead and feed him for those moments where he's interacting. So again, if let's say he's doing a great job checking it out, yes, I'm going to feed again for that little response. If this is going really well, where he's seeming comfortable, he's seeming relaxed, he's seeming interested, I could, for example, offer a bit of food, and then as he's eating, he kind of eats it out of the palm of my hand, but slightly through the nose of the noseband of the head collar. So, and you'll see that his body language is still very comfortable, very relaxed. I don't want to also make this spooky. So remember how you can also tarnish or poison food as well as a skill or a cue behavior. So for example, let's say your dog was scared of going into the bathroom to go take a tub and you lured him with some food. Your food is then almost used as a trick moment. And then the next time you try to lure him again, he'll be like, I'm on to you. This might be the tub again. So you want to make sure that if you are luring, it's not luring the dog into something they find very overwhelming or stressful, because you're going to poison you using food as a negative situation, the bringer of the bad. So again, right now we're feeding. And let's say he's doing a pretty good job. I might do a couple little moments of several snacks, one after the other. So have a couple little in my hand and then feed. Nice. Yes. Beautiful. So again, in the beginning, I'd almost recommend a few days to a few weeks, depending on how often and how well he's doing with the practice, but make it where the head collar doesn't instantly equal restriction of motion or tension or frustration or anxiety. So you can see that again, his body language is nice and relaxed and comfortable, and we're just building up that putting our cute little nose into this area and feeling it out is no big deal. As he starts to get more comfortable, you would start to see if you can go ahead and offer the behavior. He's like, give me more snacks right there. Yes, I'm gonna feed for that. So even if in the beginning you're shaping for the bigger skills, so building up to it in little increments, perfectly great. So this is also, again, there's some great resources on like how to condition a muzzle. It'd be very similar to conditioning a head collar. So remember, muzzle training is something I do recommend to all of my students, from puppies to adults to non-reactive or very easygoing dogs, because muzzle training, if it's only used when it's a bad situation or the dog is injured or the dog is really stressed and now you slap on a muzzle, that's going to be another moment where now another piece of anxiety is added to the mix, and then they start to associate the muzzle with the bringer of bad as well. So remember, muzzle training is also a wonderful way to get your dog comfortable wearing a piece of equipment that in case of an emergency, they already feel comfortable using, and it's not always paired with the stressful or overwhelming event. So right now, Mr. Z is doing a great job. And again, we're just gonna feed for that lovely little nose going in. So head collars, again, the Halti brand, and it's Halti, is one of my favorites. If you are gonna try a head collar, they have a couple different varieties, and some of them I like better than others. So if you're unsure, you can always check in. But again, always think about, am I showing the dog what I would like him to do versus am I trying to rush steps where he doesn't know what the behavior might be, and I'm trying to look for a tool to somehow stop him from failing or doing the wrong behavior from our perspective. So we want to make sure that we're teaching what we want versus looking for the tool to be the only reason the dog is maybe performing a task. So if the head collar is more for a safety situation where you're, again, conditioning the dog to the item, and you're allowing then Mr. Z to start to practice with this at his rate, then this could be a potentially really helpful tool for loose leash walking when there could be other distractions and where he, for example, is so powerful that it's going to keep you safe and him safe in certain situations. But again, that doesn't mean to flood him and plop him into really hard situations and then strap this on. So remember, we want to keep it easy, comfortable, and feeling safe from his perspective too. So that way the head collar stays a positive and comfortable tool to use versus one more thing that might be another scary item down the road. So he did a really nice job with the head collar. So we'll give him a little breather. We'll keep working on this throughout the couple more sessions that he has. And we'll see if we can get him to the point where maybe he can even tolerate wearing it and practicing a few skills and go from there. Okay, I'll be right there, Ebba. Sorry, my little one has a question. So, but with Mr. Z and the head collar, really great job starting off, and we'll work a few more skills and give him a break from this.